So good to be here with you always. We are celebrating the day of rest, right? The Sabbath day. It's kind of going to be the message this morning. Thinking back when I was a kid, probably the same for you guys, even though you're not as old as I am. Everything was closed on Sundays. Gas stations, you had to get gas on Saturday because gas stations, all stores were closed. Everything shut down. Everything was quiet. You couldn't do anything but, maybe stay home, cut your grass, and, watch the game or something. But what we've seen over the past 30 or 40 years is this constant, frenetic society amping up. And there was a book written a number of years ago by a great biblical scholar, Walter Brueggemann. And the title of the book was The Sabbath. A revolutionary protest, I believe, is the subtitle there. And what Brueggemann, having spent a lifetime of looking at the Hebrew Bible, recognized that in the Israelite society of that time, that it extricated itself from the empire of Egypt and empire in general. And what the idea of Egypt or Babylon or any of these empire-minded civilizations, they were about working you to death. Right? That was their game. You just work and you supply your life energy to the state and you build the state and you give all that you have basically to the flourishing of the state. And the Israelite view of the Sabbath is a revolutionary idea. Because what it basically says is your life isn't just about work. It's actually to be dedicated, a certain day of the week, to be dedicated to stopping all work. That includes your animals, right? You can't allow your animals to go and till the field. Like everything gets quiet. Everything rests. And when we go into the New Testament teachings, especially in the Epistle to the Hebrews, the author there is saying that there's like this cosmic Sabbath coming, where everything is going to rest. The entire cosmos is going to go into Shabbat, into rest, right? It's going to cease from its works. And that's a beautiful idea, and it's also a perennial idea if you begin to pick up these, crisscrosses of symbols and realize that the idea of Sabbath and rest is really coming to a place of settledness and peace within your heart, right? To stopping the churning of the egoic mind, which is always seeking outside and wanting to acquire and possess and control, right? Like an empire, like an emperor or a pharaoh. And pharaoh is often the symbol of the ego within these, teachings of the Bible. And so it's like we have to extricate ourselves from this egoic machinery. And what better way to do it is one day a week at least, right? But the idea is in this coming world, right, what in Hebrew what the rabbis will call the Olam Haba. It's not the world to come as it's often translated, but it's more of a participial phrase, the world that is coming, the world that's actually here. If you would only stop and get quiet, you'd realize that the next world, the higher world, is here. But we have to enter it by getting quiet. Right? So Jesus says this in A Course in Miracles. He says, rest in peace is not a declaration meant for the dead. It's meant for the living. And so this resting in peace, this Shabbat, this coming to quiescence, is really at the heart of all mystical spirituality. And so that's what we're going to be looking at this morning. We'll be looking at it through the lens of Tibetan Buddhism and Chan or Zen Buddhism. And we're also going to be given a very keen anecdotal experience from Dr. David Hawkins in his book, Letting Go. So we'll see how all of this ties together. But let's enter this open receptivity to receive, allow this message to come forth. Finding the flow of your breath. So we want to collectively shift gears now from this outgoing, frenetic, active, reactive mind to allowing that mind to drop into the silence of the heart and to feel this melting of boundaries, dissolving of boundaries, and an openness to this deeper peace, this vaster silence and sacred space that permeates and expands into everything and everyone, everywhere. This higher mind that is always at rest. We want to join in communion with this true mind, this Zen mind, Buddha mind, or Christ mind. So, just like the ancient Israelites were instructed, we set aside all of our worldly concerns this morning, all of our confusions and problems, all of the babble of our life, and we let it quiet down and become still, and we rest in shalom and peace. So we'll open with the teachings of Master Hongji, a Chinese Chan master, Buddhist Zen master. Yeah, so you know Chan is Zen and Zen is Chan. So just briefly here, this is entitled The Original Dwelling. A person practicing the way subtly goes beyond words and thoughts, instantly authentic. One is on the affirmed path and does not attach to reasoning, extensively intermingled. The moon flows in all the waters. The wind blows through the supreme emptiness, naturally, without touching or obstructing things. Transcendent illumination and function are only illuminating without stains and functioning without leaving traces. So just to illuminate the illumination here. So when he's talking about the moon flowing in all the waters, the moon in Buddhist iconography is the enlightened mind. And as we're going to see with the story of Dr. David Hawkins, this enlightened mind permeates all things, is all things, right? Including the one listening right now, right? There's no bystander that can actually stand outside of this awakened consciousness. You're directly, immediately this. And so what Hongji is saying is that when the moon, your enlightened awareness, it's flowing through everything. We're arresting our attention through reasoning, through conditioning. And we've become this isolated identity center. And as a result of that, we suffer, because to flow out and to be all things is the peace, is the rest, is the wholeness or shalom that we're really looking for in our seeking as this little identity center. And then he says the wind, right? The wind blows through the supreme emptiness, naturally without touching or obstructing things. And the wind is like the spirit, right? So in Jesus' statement in John's gospel, he says, you know, in order to see the kingdom of God, you have to be born from above. You have to see with a different eye. You have to awaken your spiritual eye You can't look through the eyes of the flesh and see the kingdom of God. But as soon as the eye that's single is open, your whole body will be filled with light. You will be in the kingdom as the kingdom. As he says in A Course in Miracles, you are the kingdom. And so this wind, he says in John's Gospel, blows wherever it wants. And those who are born of the Spirit are like that. They're free. They're not held back by, convention and all of these rationalizations and limiting beliefs and patterns of behavior and what I thought I should be and who I should be now. As Hongji said, this is instantly authentic. There's no analytical process that goes on. You're that now. But it's a process of dropping the cumbersome identity that just keeps saying, well, this is me and that's me, and and we just have to watch that, and it eventually exhausts itself, as we'll see with Dr. David Hawkins. It's a continuous process in the earlier stages of just letting go. Surrender, surrender. Just keep, during this service, surrender. Surrender your identities, surrender your memories, surrender your impressions, surrender everything that's coming up. And you will eventually touch down into this vastness, which is you, authentically you. That's why it's so natural, right? There's no thinking about it. You don't have to be told about it. You have to just be shown, like the finger pointing to the moon. Once you have the moon in sight, you don't need the finger, the words, the thoughts. Then you can enter samadhi, he goes on to say, right? This is the deep absorption within your non-dual self. Then you can enter samadhi in every sense dust and gather the 10,000 forms in the single seal. So this is also, we're going to be borne out in Hawkins' experience. You're going to be entering into this total identity of the vast one self, Buddha mind, this bright, illumined awareness. But it's also found in every moment of the senses. Your eyes, your ears, your nose, your tongue, your body, your mind. Everything actually is being illuminated by the ground of your being. You couldn't see without this. You couldn't hear without this. You couldn't smell, taste, or touch without this. You couldn't think without this. That's why in the Upanishads, the rishis there are saying it's the eye behind the eye. It's the ear behind the ear. It's the mind behind the mind. It's what's allowing all of this to be lit. And you are that. Tattvamasi. You are that. You're not the little identity center. You're the vast self. Know that, right? This instant, authentically. This is your truth. This is your inheritance. Discontinue leaks. Leaks. Discontinue leaking. And do not act on these leaks. In other words, don't disperse your energy. Squirrel. Right? This is what he's talking about. It's this constant going out with the monkey mind. The monkey mind is jumping from branch to branch. Never still. And as Krishna says in the Gita, the mind of the ignorant person is many-branched and very diffuse. That's why you can't see or know anything. It's scattered light. Don't leak. Bring it in, right? We all have like this incontinent mind. We're leaking everywhere. We need mental diapers. How's that for an image? So you bring yourself back into the consolidated state. That's what samadhi. Samadhi is concentration, collection, right? Harnessing, settling, resting, not going out, coming home. This is called understanding the affair. Got it? This is called understanding the affair. Moreover, you must remember and return to the homeward path. Now he's going to put out these ideas of winter imagery. And in Chinese, right, Taoist, Chan metaphors, winter is coming home. Winter is the emptiness or the absence, which is the allness of our deepest nature. It's when everything comes in, right? Everything gets consolidated, right? It'll burst out in spring, and it will wither and drop and fall. But in winter, everything comes home. Everything gets quiet. This is why he's going to say this. The clouds evaporate in the cold sky. The autumn has departed, and the mountain is barren. This is where we originally dwell. Right? The clouds, all of our false imaginings, all of our private thoughts, all of our disturbing emotions and memories and images and prognostications and what the future is going to be like. All of those are clouds. And in the cold sky of simply being still, letting be and watching, you withdraw your attention. You're not letting it heat up and leak into image making and memory making and patterns of future prognosticate. You're just withdrawing your attention. The sky, your awareness, becomes cold. And all of these clouds, which were blocking you from the clarity of the moment, dissolve. Right? Totally natural. There's a deep chord within us that knows this. Yes? So this is a very interesting book, Letting Go. I'm sure many of you know about this book, Dr. David Hawkins. This is his chapter on peace. So he says, in peace there is no longer any conflict. There is total absence of negativity and an all-encompassing lovingness that is experienced as serenity, tranquility, timelessness, completion, fulfillment, stillness, and contentment. There is inner quiet and a light, a feeling of oneness, unity, and total freedom. The peace is imperturbable. So if you are a student of A Course in Miracles, if you attend our classes here, you know we read the introduction before every lesson every week. And that introduction ends with, nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. And herein lies the peace of God. Right? The mind has been cured of its disease of making the unreal real. These clouds, these private thoughts, right? This thought of me as this solid identity center or ego. There's no peace in that. It's conflict. Because you are immediately at odds with your environment. If you're this little bag of flesh and bone, and these wants and needs that are privately your own alone, then that means everything else is not you. a potential ally, maybe to get your needs met, or oftentimes a potential enemy that threatens your need of getting what you want because they might want to take that from you or block you from getting it. So the ego is never at peace. The ego is never still. The ego can never rest. Yes? Always busy, even in church. Yeah? Actions become effortless, spontaneous, harmonious, and loving in their effect. There is a shift of perception of the universe and of our relationship to it. The inner self prevails. The personal self has been transcended with all of its feelings, beliefs, identities, and concerns. How else will you have peace? Did you ever think about that? You know, when the beauty pageant winner wants world peace, like it's all about world peace. Well, how can you have world peace if your mind is constantly restless and if you're identified with the impermanent? The impermanent is always going through changes. It's never stable, it's never still, and therefore it can never be at peace. You as the body identity will never know imperturbable peace. So when we think of getting this enlightened state of peace, there is this need to withdraw from making these private thoughts real, making these egoic beliefs real, making the identity that I am this body real. So this is what we do in meditation. It's a dropping, it's a letting go, it's a surrendering. Right? We empty. It's the paradox. You empty to become full. You die to truly live. You lose yourself to find yourself. That's peace. And Jesus says it's a narrow way, and few find it. And the reason why few find it is because so many of us are white-knuckling our identity. And we want it to win. Even if it's winning at being the biggest victim, we want it to win. So the inner self prevails, the personal self has been transcended with all of its feelings, beliefs, identities, and concerns. This is the ultimate state sought by all seekers, whether they are religious, humanist, or have no spiritual or philosophical identification at all. It's the universal experience. It transcends labeling and schools of thought. It's your natural inheritance. It's who we are as this primordial awareness. Now, he gives this amazing experience of going to a restaurant on a cold winter's day, by the way. And so you're going to have to bear with me. I'm going to read in length, but it's so worth it. Because he shows that in the most mundane environment, the most transmundane experience is taking place, and everything just keeps going on the way it normally would in a busy restaurant. It was a cold winter day. Now, he's been in this process of surrendering constantly for months, and he had really heated it up over the past 11 days, as he's going to tell us. Surrendering identity, surrendering beliefs, surrendering fears, surrendering thoughts of future or past, surrendering it all. Surrender was continuous for 11 straight days at a level of consciousness that had never been reached previously, not even during psychoanalysis. It had to do with the ego's very basis of survival and its identification, excuse me, as an individual. It had to do with how we experience our own existence and the desire to experience our own beingness. So, not to brush by too quickly, this survival reaches these layers of, this surrender reaches these layers of survival, right? First chakra, Muladhara kind of stuff, where you feel like you have to do something or you're going to die, or how can this be happening to me? I'm not going to make it. You will reach those layers within yourself. And you still have to have the presence of mind, the discipline, and the commitment to surrender even those darkest, deepest, most troublesome fears, right? The earthquakes and cataclysms of your own existence. Surrender. Even then, don't white knuckle it, because you're getting pay dirt when you reach that level of your psyche. And it's really flaring up, and it's really dark, and really ugly, and really confusing. That's when you surrender more. That's when you really heat it up. As the days went by, the process seemed endless. A doubt surfaced. Was this attempting the impossible, said the doubt? It became clear that the purpose of that doubt itself was a defense mechanism. It was relinquished, and the surrender continued at great depth. So do you see, we have these things that come in. The voice will say, is this possible? Do you really want to do this? And that is a defense mechanism. So you have to keep that in mind. The ego is always trying to defend you from hearing this message. You'll look at a screen instead of listening to this message. You'll be completely taken away from really one-pointedly listening. Because deep down, the ego feels its survival is being threatened. Why be here? Then entering a restaurant on that cold, rainy Sunday afternoon, sitting down alone at the table, suddenly the world was miraculously transformed. A profound sense of inner stillness and peace occurred. It was greater than anything imaginable. The experience was beyond time. In fact, time had no meaning whatsoever, nor did space exist in the way in which we commonly experience it. All things were connected. There was only one life, expressing itself with one self through all living things. There was no identification with the body and no interest in it. It was no longer any more interesting than any other body in the room. All emotions and events were interconnected, and all phenomena occurred because each thing was manifesting its own inner nature spontaneously. As though movement and growth were the spontaneous unfolding of potential. There was a rock-like quality to the imperturbable stillness. It was obvious that the real self was invisible, without beginning, without end, and that there had been only a transitory identification with the body, and the story that went with the identification as an individual, all while seemingly in a restaurant. No, clouds and booming and descending of angels. Just knowing, clarity, understanding, and the recognition that it's already here, it's already perfect, and we are all already that. It seemed very strange that one could previously have thought that one was an isolated body, separate from others, with a limited beginning and a finite ending. The thought seemed absurd. There was no longer any feeling of a separate self, and the pronoun I disappeared and became meaningless. Instead, there was the awareness of being all things. It had always been and always would be. True beingness stood outside of time. The period of time that the body had been on earth seemed like a split second during which the truth of timeless identity had been forgotten due to being blinded by the smaller self. It's like coming out of a sleep or a drunken state, as all the mystics describe it. Whew! What was that? And here we are again, as we always forever will be and always forever were. Just a blip. Why prolong that? Okay, so then how it had happened revealed itself. There had been a wishful thought to experience separate existence, and this wishful thought had manifested itself as the individual person with an individual identity and a physical body to go with it. A wishful thought. And this is what A Course in Miracles says. The ego wishes, God wills. Yeah? So a wishful thought is not idle because it can give rise to a whole world of separate individuality. A wishful thought. And so you get to experience what that wishful thought would lend your awareness. The inner connectedness of all things was starkly obvious. It was the holographic universe as described by the Buddha and by modern advanced theoretical physics, both of whom agree as to the intrinsic nature of the universe. Because everything was perfect, there was nothing to wish for, nothing to desire, nothing to create, and nothing to become. There was only that, the very essence of beingness out of which existence arises. That beingness is the source of existence, yet curiously not its cause. There was a profound familiarity to the awareness. It was as though one had always known it, as if one were home at last. So there's the enlightened state. Nothing special, but very special. Right? Coming home. Always knew this. There were no emotions or feelings. There was an unawareness of sensations. Even though they seemed to go on, they were no longer personal or of concern. By way of experimentation, a thought was held for a split second to see what would happen. Right? So mind you, he's sitting in this restaurant at this table, experiencing this infinite one self, knowing he is all things. Right? And there's no real he there. And everything is interconnected. And the thought occurred, let's play, let's experiment. And what was the experiment? Almost instantly there was an effect in the physical world. The thought of butter or coffee, for instance, resulted in the waiters coming over immediately with the items. And yet no word had been spoken. No words seemed necessary. Communication occurred with anyone on a level of silence. We're all patched into this. This is the ground of our being. That's why if you're in this place of peace and rest, and you get around an animal, the animal always seems to have an affinity with you. Naturally wants to come maybe lay on your lap or get some attention. People are like this too. When you're in a state of real peace and rest, there's a natural drawing, like Ramakrishna said, bees want to come to the flower. Right? People feel uplifted when the person is radiating this peace. And not only that, but your thoughts have such potency and instantaneous results, as Hawkins was experimenting with. Don't have to say a word. You know, Sri Ramana Maharshi was asked, when people come to you and want to be healed, what is it that you do? Because there was a lot of healings that resulted from asking Sri Ramana. And he says, the jnani, the knower, the one who knows this self as the self of all, doesn't think a particular thought, just healing. And that person whose request was to the jnani receives the healing. This is how it becomes a mind-to-mind transmission, as they say in Zen. From this silence, all things are said. You know, St. Francis of Assisi, famous quote, wherever you go, preach the gospel, and sometimes use words. The body drove the car to a meeting that evening where no one noticed anything different. And he goes on. Right? Nothing special. How many times have we been around supremely awakened beings? And we're kind of like, you know, this guy's walking too slow, man. I got to go get my flower in the aisle. You know, can you move? And meanwhile, it could be that being. That's why in the Bible it says, you know, don't ever turn away from, you know, being hospitable to others, because you might be entertaining angels unaware. So treating all beings with this deep level of respect. So let the practice continue, surrendering, right? So allowing the teaching to absorb, to do its work, get the impressions. You know, I love Gurdjieff's teaching when he says that, you know, we eat different kinds of food. So we eat physical food, we eat liquid food. He even says we eat food born in the air, right? Like things that are in the air, we're eating them, like microplastics and chemtrails. We're eating those. But what Gurdjieff's also saying is we're eating impressions. And what he means by that are the thoughts that we think, the things that we hear, the images that our eyes light upon. That too is food. And that will get metabolized. So be aware of what you eat. Are you eating junk and empty calories when it comes to these impressions of sights and thoughts and sounds? Make your diet healthier. Right? Krishna says this in the Bhagavad Gita. All creation, all nature has these three qualities, right? The dark, the heavy, and the inertic, the tamas, the energetic, the passionate, the transformative, the rajas, and then you have the sattva, which is illuminative, harmonious, and leads to the higher self. And so in the Gita, Krishna is always saying, everything in nature has these three qualities. What you want to do, if you want to wake up to this one blissful self, is eat only things that are sattvic, that are harmonious, that are peaceful, that are loving, that are kind, that illuminate your life, right? Clean water and clean food, but also clean thoughts, clean images. These are the impressions that we feed ourselves. Let's do this one first. Okay, so in Tibetan Buddhism, one of the key figures there is Padmasambhava. Yeah, many people probably know Padmasambhava. He's considered to be the second Buddha. He's basically the patron saint of Tibetan Buddhism. And Padmasambhava is a fascinating character. He lived around the year 700 of our Common Era. And according to the legends around Padmasambhava, he had a lot of teachings that he didn't reveal during his lifetime. And so what he did was, a couple of things. He would hide them in these sacred sites or places around Tibet, right? And he would also hide them, this is far out stuff now, because we're dealing with this higher psychology. He would hide them in the mind streams of his disciples. And so the mind stream is what continues birth after birth, taking up forms and dropping forms. So at some point in the predetermined future, these reincarnated teachers that were studying under Padmasambhava, they would have dreams. They would go to a higher realm and receive these teachings. In other words, the teachings that were put into the mind stream would ignite. They would become aware. And those teachings are called dharma. They are hidden teachings. And the ones that reveal these hidden teachings are kirtans. And so this is treasures from Juniper Ridge, and they're supposedly within that classification of teaching. Okay? Now, Yeshe Sogyal was Padmasambhava's #1 disciple. And she asks this question: which vital point contains every type of wisdom? Like, what should I focus on first? Like, what's the source that I need to really pay attention to? And the master replied, now keep in mind everything that we just talked about with Dr. David Hawkins, his experience. Now listen to this, 1,300 years ago. The master replied, self-existing wakefulness is the vital point of every type of wisdom. Other wisdoms change and do not last. Self-existing wakefulness naturally present since the primordial beginning. It's the nature of true reality. It's unlimited self-knowing, right? To this self-existing wakefulness, nothing remains unknown. Nothing remains unseen. Nothing remains unrealized. But remember what we've been learning. This happens naturally in a flash. You've always been this. It's a letting go of everything you're not, including the doubts. Like, how is that possible? How can I ever know everything? Those are the delay mechanisms. That's what would be the stumbling block, that if we really don't want to come home, we'll pay attention to that, right? Since this self-existing wakefulness is awake and unfathomable in essence, it is also the basis for every truth and every wisdom. It is their abode and is therefore known as the vital point that contains every type of wisdom. Right? It's like empty space. So space is the vital point that contains all that appears and all that exists. The four elements are all changing and impermanent, but from the very beginning, the nature of space is empty and unchanging. And Dr. Hawkins said that when that awareness dawned, it was like a spacious awareness. But it's not physical space. It's a higher space, right? And I don't mean to throw all of these ideas at you this morning, but Sri Ramana would be asked, like, what is the nature of the pure self? And he would say there are three spaces. There is the space in which all of these elements are arising. There's the space in which all of your thoughts are arising. And then there's this primordial space that is always pure, unstained, and still. So as we draw in, we evaporate the clouds of the elements. We evaporate the clouds of the thoughts, feelings, and bodily sensations. And we naturally begin to realize that this true atmosphere is right here, right now. It's the root of our being. We're just being distracted from it. So everything is fleeting but this spacious awareness. And then Padmasambhava continues, when these fleeting appearances are showing up, they're all showing up within space. While they remain within the expanse of space, and when they dissolve within that same expanse. Since the nature of space is unchanging throughout the three times, all that appears and exists can be condensed into space. So that's what we're going to finish up with this morning. A little bit of a silent sitting practice so that we can evaporate these distractions. So your feet firmly planted on the floor, your spine nice and straight, the crown of your head naturally being pulled up as if by an invisible thread. Relax into your sits bones. Allow that breath to go all the way down into the lower stomach, below the navel point. And relax. Pay attention and breathe. Surrender. Keep surrendering. And as you let go and let go, see if you can just be here as awareness, not as the body, not as your past, not as yourself. Just get a clear sense of just being here, being aware, being awake, without anything else added on to that. Even if it's just for an instant. Rest from being you. And bringing hands to heart, feeling this harmony between the polarities of body and mind, resting within the still point at the center of the chest. And from this still, peaceful awareness at the core of being, Buddha bows to Buddha. All right, now that you've been surrendering spiritually, surrender all your money. Blue bag's going to go around. I take watches and checkbooks and anything else you want to throw in that blue bag. Any thoughts, comments, questions maybe? Keep coming back. Wow, both of you. Blessing the offering with the intention that whatever form it may take, that the energy be used for awakening the oneself to its true being, and so it is. Amen. All right, my friends, let's rise, seal the deal. Remember, tomorrow night, 7:15, A Course in Miracles, right in this room. As we come to rest and relish in that deep state of peace that we began to cultivate together this morning, let's protect this peace as we go throughout the day. It is precious, so don't trade it for anything. Stay within the center of the storm. Always remain at home, no matter where you are. And then you will know that the light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. And the presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is. Amen. Beautiful day, everybody. Thank you for being here.